In today's class and video, we are going to look at the types of spectrophotometer. So one, depending on the range of the wavelength of light, spectrophotometer is of two types. One, the UV visible spectrophotometer and the IR or the infrared spectrophotometer. So let's start by looking at the UV visible spectrophotometer. It uses light over the ultraviolet range, and that is within a wavelength from 100 nanometer to 400 nanometer, and the visible range, which is also of a wavelength from 400 to 700 nanometer of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, to measure the amount of light absorbed by a sample or the amount of light transmitted through that sample. So the second is the infrared spectrophotometer, and this uses wavelength of light over the infrared range, and that is within a wavelength of 700 to 1500 nanometers of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, to measure the amount of light absorbed by a test sample or transmitted through it. And two, based on the number of beams of light, spectrophotometer is also of two types. So we have the single beam spectrophotometer and the double beam spectrophotometer. For the single beam spectrophotometer, the selected light beam from the monochromator, as shown from its basic instrumentation here, travels in a single direction, and the test solution and the blank solution are read in a cuvette in the same sample compartment, one after the other or in a sequential order. So the picture here shows a single beam spectrophotometer, and this is its basic instrumentation explaining how it works. So what we can see over here is that this single beam spectrophotometer has just one sample compartment where the blank is placed in a cuvette to calibrate or zero the spectrophotometer, after which it will be removed and the test sample will be placed in the same sample compartment in a cuvette to measure the value. The second is the double beam spectrophotometer. So this is a picture of the double beam spectrophotometer with several sample compartments, as you can see. So we have like 4 sample compartments here, which is used to hold the reference or the blank sample and the test sample at the same time, and to simultaneously measure the light transmittance through them. And this is its basic instrumentation explaining how it works. So one key thing that we have to note here is that in the double beam spectrophotometer, it has a partially coated mirror, which is also known as the beam splitter. So this is it over here, and this is used to split the selected light beam, which is coming from the monochromator, into 2 parts. So this is the first part and this is also the second part. And once this happens, one beam is allowed to enter the sample cell as shown over here, whilst the other beam is further reflected by a mirror and allows to enter the reference cells or the blank as shown over here. So the main difference between the single beam spectrophotometer and the double beam spectrophotometer is that the single beam spectrophotometer uses a single beam of light to measure the transmitted light intensity of both the blank or the reference and the sample cuvette sequentially in the same sample compartment, whereas the double beam spectrophotometer splits the light beam coming from the monochromator into two parts and measures the transmitted light intensity of both the reference sample and the test sample contained in a cuvette simultaneously. So this is the key or the basic difference between the single beam spectrophotometer and the double beam spectrophotometer.